Friend, welcome back to the show. Today I'm joined by Karen Wilson. She's an executive, an author, an advocate for mental health and wellness. Her debut book called Protective Love is more than just a memoir. It's a collection of lessons, reflections, and journaling prompts that help readers navigate life's challenges with wisdom and grace. Drawing from the legacy of her mother, Miss Ruth May, Karen shares stories of hope, hardship, and resilience. Karen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is so great. So, getting the opportunity to talk with Gabrielle, and she told me a ton about you. I said, send me everything. I want to learn about Karen, right? And so here we are. I'm excited to talk about this because when I wrote my book, it was a very deep reflection around my father, and you know, and it tied a lot of stories of resilience, which really helped me learn about myself even more. And in
hmm
your book, Protective Love, which is a deeply personal set of stories, what inspired you to take these lessons from your mother and turn them into your book?
So the powerful piece about my story is that I didn't set this in motion, right? A friend who
Hmm.
who knew that I had written a journal for
Mm,
years and who actually knew my mother really well and who knew my story with my mother really well, encouraged me. Right? She did more than encourage me. She challenged me. So she
mm,
challenged me to really think that my journaling really had benefit because she was living through some of the things that I was journaling. And so, because she lived through them with me. And so she sort of said, you know what? I think there's something to this. And then she put me in the best editorial hands I could think of with Holly
mhm,
Jenkins Livers. And
mm,
Holly really started the healing process for me because I had to understand how I was writing to myself, right? And how I needed to enlighten and educate and empower and encourage the reader. So it took me from a place of possibly
mm.
writing what could have been a painful experience and write it to a completely grateful experience. And there is no
Yeah.
better healing journey than that, to actually look at the lessons that occurred throughout your life and appreciate them in real time. You know what, it really blessed me. And so once
Mm,
we were finished with the lessons, and we never put a number on them, so it was just, we were just going through, and we got to where we felt like, okay, you know what, do you think that what your mother's life and her legacy um, meant to you and meant for you, do you think that her journey was completed in everything she deposited into you? And it did. And that's how we got to we were never numbering, we were just
mhm.
going through the journal.
Sharing the stories.
So I
Yeah.
hope the process was, I hope your book was equally healing, because to me, there's just nothing greater.
I love that we're going there already,
Yep.
because you're 100% right. It's a healing journey. It's a healing process. I didn't think it was going to be that either. Because I've told the story in a variety of ways, speaking and things like that. But actually sitting down, the writing process does something emotional, right? Because you gotta go back in your memory bank and
hmm
really visit that younger version of you
hmm
and see it from the older generation's lens.
exactly.
And yeah, and then now, you're seeing your younger self. There's times where it's sad, there's times
hmm
where you're struggling, and you start to build a lot of compassion, not only for yourself, but everybody around you. I started seeing my mother, my father, my brothers
hmm
differently once I started going back into those memories that I thought were just painful, too painful to go into detail. So, what was that experience for you? Was it, obviously, for me, it was, yes, healing for sure. And writing those hard moments was really hard. But after writing, I don't know if you felt this either. Like, after writing, I felt like a little bit of weight came off. and a little bit more weight came off. Just, thoroughly. Like journaling is one thing, but knowing that someone else is going to read this was a different ball game for me. How did you feel about when you started writing consistently, knowing that other people were going to start reading your work?
Well, I approached it from a standpoint of being intentionally authentic, right? However, I was so focused that no lesson that I was meant to learn through my mother's legacy was going to hurt another person. Because some lessons you learn, as few other people were in there with it too, right? You're like, okay, we're all going down in the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hardest part, was that I was not going to intentionally make my journey and my healing cause any other person pain. And so that kind of kept me really grounded, right? Really grounded. This is about me. This is this lesson that my mother was teaching that I learned, right? It had universal implications. So I was exhilarated. In fact, I didn't want to stop. I like that part of the process more than I like lights, camera, action, and and having a conversation. Because
Yeah.
And I may have shared that with Gabrielle, and I'm not sure if I did, but when I was working on this, I always envisioned my mother reading it. For me, I was writing it so she somehow or another in heavenly spaces, she would be like, you know what? I did not think that girl. I mean, now you know what? How many punishments would it take? So to me,
wow.
that was my audience. I didn't envision it outside of it. I knew it had universal implications. I knew I couldn't have been the only person who needed to understand that, when you go through tough times, it reveals who you were all the time. One of the things I love was the enemy is, talks to you more than the enemy, right? My mother was, she was emphatic about what you say to yourself, right? And usually I always said the wrong thing to myself when I was in a situation where I was sort of at a pivot. So, but I was exhilarated at the end because I envisioned by the time I really got flowing with it, I envisioned my mother reading it and saying, you know what? I did not waste that punishment and that energy on that girl. And it brought me tremendous peace. So I'm in a space now where my level of gratitude is I can trust the promise that I don't even see in the midst of any process that I'm going through. And I don't think I would have been able to accomplish it without writing Protective Love.
Yeah. So powerful and well said. So when you started journaling, about what age were you and what prompted you to start journaling?
So I started journaling in my 20s, but I wasn't really consistent. I wasn't consistent, in my 20s. When I really got serious about journaling, it was in my early 30s. And I knew that there were lessons, there was things to be grateful for. I knew that, at the end of the day, sometimes I did it in the beginning of the day, where I really wanted to get up and see, what the possibilities were. So I was probably in my 30s when I really got consistent with it, when I could really see myself beyond my circumstance. And the journaling allowed me to do that.
And so what is it about that relationship with the journal that allows you to go deeper and deeper into it? Besides the gratitude things, because I find myself writing like a random memory would come up, and I remember it triggered me in a negative way. And I would sit down and just like, I need to get this off of my chest. I need to write about it. And sometimes I would come up like 3 or 4 times processing it in a way. Did you ever go through that?
Absolutely, because some of the lessons you don't get immediately, right? There are a
Mm,
lot of lessons that you don't get in real time. It allowed me to be retrospective and prospective, right, at the same time, because it would take me back. And I can encourage people to say, look, if something circles back again, and and you've taken time and it's written, there's something that you probably hadn't learned in the first go round, right? And ultimately, the more disappointing something can be, the more painful something can be, the more important it is for me to have to put it in writing. Because remember, I'm writing just like you. I'm writing it to myself. And
yeah.
sometimes I can remember in my early days, I would say, I'm gonna need an attitude adjustment. Like I'd be writing to myself, girl, you're gonna need an attitude adjustment. You're gonna need to start this day over.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna have to, bring this all the way
Yeah.
back in. And so that's when I really got a rhythm with it. And
Mhm.
I had a love for it.
Yeah. What time of the day do you journal? Is it a morning or an evening routine for you?
Morning now.
Mm,
Always in the morning.
yeah.
So because I'm in a different space. So
Yeah.
always in the morning. But when I started, it wasn't like that. It was
Right.
arbitrary. I would just make sure that I was journaling. I didn't set time aside.
Mm,
So at that point, I just made sure I had my books. I was writing, when I had a moment. But now, in my mind, I call it like morning glory. I get up,
yeah.
like,
I
okay,
love that.
right? So
Yeah.
it's morning glory, right? And so
Yeah.
I just think it's power in it.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's it's sort of the processing
Mhm.
it's the warming up. It's the adding ingredients to
Mhm.
the bowl and putting the right ingredients in the right place. So as you mix the thing throughout the week or the day, you're mixing the right things. You have the right mentality. Yeah. Every time I miss, a day or two of journaling in the mornings, or like especially after my prayer, it's just
Mhm.
something's off, right? Like it
It
just
is.
like the salt's missing or like the
Mhm.
sugar,
It
right?
is. It
So
is.
something's missing. So I agree with that. I love that. So your book includes a lot of journaling prompts, which I actually really appreciate. But why was that important for you to encourage your readers to reflect not only on what they read, but to reflect on parts of their life so that they can journal within your book as well? Why was that important to you?
Because in my mind, the one thing that and I don't know if it's the time that I grew up or just the way I grew up, but I always, I always knew that things that were happening to me were not just isolated to me. So, it was really important for me to leave space for people, who maybe have never journaled before, and maybe something in my story triggered something for them, right? To
Mm,
say, hey, it's okay that you don't have all the answers, right? Because that's how I journal like that. And even when in my morning glory, I journal like that. Like, I'm not going to have all the answers in today, right? And so
yeah.
the best thing I can do is make a deposit where I can. And ultimately, sometimes I have to in humanity, I've got to make a withdrawal too. Sometimes I have to regret a quick decision or a quick response to something, but that's okay as well. So that's why it was so important for me to really just leave that space for people if they want to. If not, they can laugh at me and, oh, I can't believe, especially the people that know me, I can't believe she did that, right? Um,
Mhm.
you know, it was really
Yeah.
up to the person. And so, but I thought, and I have heard from some people, which I love. Oh my God, you really inspired me. And oh, I never knew you journaled.
Mm,
Oh my God, I
yeah,
never knew. Right. So,
yeah, yeah. It's a
but
very
yeah,
private thing, of course, but
yeah, of
yeah,
course.
that's beautiful. So some of the lessons in your book are, of course, like many uh, who have come before us, right? They write about the sad parts. They write
Mhm.
about the good parts. They write about the comedic part, the hilarious parts that we all love and cherish. Is there a particular lesson or story that really stood out to you that was really either hard to write about or very enjoyable to write about?
So It's funny that you say that, and I've been really honest, and so there's a lot of lessons that lead me back to this one lesson. But
Mm,
the piece that I love about my mother, right? And I'm not sure if she recognized it in me
mhm,
because she recognized it in herself, right? So my mother was a person that identified self-doubt. I mean, even
mm,
when I think in my early lesson when she was telling me about being the lead in the play, I'm like 9 years old. I just don't want to learn a whole lot of lines. I'm like, okay, like now I got extra work to do, right? So, but I believe that she recognized that self doubt would be something that I was going to have to deal with throughout the course of my life.
mm,
So, the most empowering lesson, the lesson that would be kind of consistent throughout some of the themes, was
mm,
that, I am enough, right? My mother was huge on saying, you're enough. And she usually whispered it.
mm,
So, or she made you do it, like, making me do the lead in the play, right? That was like,
mm,
you're enough, girl. You need to be the lead, right? I was too young to really understand it. But as I aged, she would whisper it when I needed it most, when I was usually at some pivot and I had some self doubt, as we all do. And so to me, that was like, it's just core. I mean, there's other themes in there, like the enemy versus the enemy. Like somebody outside of yourself can tell you that
mm,
you are not worthy, but don't you say you're not worthy. It all circles back to that I am enough. And even to this day, my mother has been going like 5 years. There will be times when something will come up and I could still hear that whisper. Now you know you're
mm.
enough. Now you're enough. So you can
Well,
all and it's not a soft. It's not soft, right? It's not a soft like back then. It wasn't soft. It was like, it could be, right? You could say
right.
it's soft. But usually to me, that lesson was like, it was powerful. And the power was that I didn't know if my mother really recognized that in herself. I believe that because she was so committed to it, and that she saw that self-doubt in me. I believe that she had to recognize it in herself. She had to understand it personally in order to deposit that for me.
Mm,
What I did see in the journey of her physical weakness, right, through all of the health challenges that she had, that she really knew, like she grew to know that I was a woman who had fought through it, right? She knew that I was overcoming it because I became her the trust, like she knew she could trust me with her life in any
mm.
circumstance. So she knew that what she had deposited, it did not go out in vain.
That's beautiful. Shout out to Miss Ruth May.
Yeah,
She
shout
sounds like an
out to her.
amazing.
Shout out to her. Shout out to her.
She
And
sounds so amazing.
yeah, shout out to her
Yeah.
for sure. And you would, and seriously, I'm serious. And when I talk about her, it can be almost as if she is, here with us. But she was what people say I am today. I am warm, but I'm not
Um,
gentle. I am warm, but I am not gentle. So she did not give you the truth soft.
yeah.
She laid
Yeah.
the truth out like, oh, this is the truth. Now you go back and
Yeah.
decide what you're gonna do with it.
Yeah. And those people always resonate deeper and deeper in our soul. And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more I remember my dad and the more I think about him and reflect on him. It was just like you said, it's all these lessons, it's all that whisper. That he comes around when I paint, when I write, and he really, yeah, he does his thing. He's just, I need you to clean that up. It's not good. And come on now, you can make it bad. Like, come, and you just hear him because I grew up like that. That's how he
Mhm,
was always around me when I created, and he always pushed me, knowing that I was up for the challenge. And
mhm.
when you have somebody just believing in you like that, it's just the most beautiful thing. And I think I deeply wrote that book as a thank you, but I think it's a life well lived to be in gratitude. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think you reflect that, obviously your aura really gives off that energy, and I appreciate that. So you talk about seeing life through a different lens. Can you share a time when a shift in perspective completely changed how you approached a specific challenge, and what our audience can take away from that?
So I can certainly say that. And I love, because now people talk about, they use these words like emotional intelligence, relational
Mm,
intelligence, right? All that. And so there's a lot to be learned in all of that. And so for sure, I had to take a shift when I became a mother. And so, and like most mothers, you're passionate about your kids, right? You just, it's like you just it's raw emotion, but it has to be emotion that you can control. And
mm,
so I write in the book about a challenge that my son was having, he had in school, and that it was going to require me to step into something, right, and to correct it, because it was the right thing to do. So I had
mm,
to kind of make a complete pivot shift, right, and really pull on my intellect to come in
mm,
to say, look, this needs to be corrected, and how do I best do this? How do I best do it, not just for my son, but for other people as well? And so that was really when I understood some of the lessons my mother was teaching me around, you got to have your emotions under control. You just can't come in. You think about it, like, I don't know if you have children. I should have asked if you are you a parent?
I got one. I got one coming. I
Oh,
got one
look at
coming end of
that.
June.
Listen, let me tell you something. You're gonna have to. We can't even tape it. After that, call me. You're gonna want to talk, because you're gonna really understand what I talk about when I talk passion, because your whole perspective changes
Yeah.
with new life, right? With a miracle, with responsibility, with the gifting that you already received from your parents. Your whole perspective is going to change. And when I say emotion is like front end, emotion is in front end. So that's why I said it was so important for me to understand how to stand up for something right, without me having my head rocked up and down, da 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 da, this isn't right. You have to, sometimes when you're standing up for something, you really have to make sure that your emotional intelligence is there, and not just your emotion. And so
Mm.
that you're gonna have to call me. That's you haven't even gone, like I said, you haven't even cheered for, you haven't even cheered for the team yet. Like, okay, if they're playing sports, that's a whole nother sport. You're like, oh, let them win, because the kids are going to be like, oh, we lost. So all of
Right.
that. So
Right.
that brings out to me, I believe that for most people who really find it honorable, who really say, look, I'm happy I brought life into the world, it immediately makes a pivot change. If you think that you're open-minded and really liberal, hey, trust you won't be. You'll make some real adjustments. You'll say, hey, here are our values. Let me spell that out for you.
Yeah. Beautiful. So right now, I feel like there are so many individuals going through this world, um, who could really benefit, I think, from just the act of journaling.
Yeah.
Um, just from the act of journaling, let alone what it does for, to really look at those emotions. There's times where I sit down and write, and I'm like, man, I was so mad about that thing that happened in 2013. Like, literally, that person got over on me, and I'm still mad about it. It's still a chip on my shoulder. There are times where I was like, I'm gonna write this thing out. So I would sit there and almost got like my emotions revved up too, right?
Mhm.
And I'm writing it out, and all of a sudden I start to see, like, this is good. Not that I was mad, just like, this is good that I can see my emotions in front of me. And
Mhm.
now today I get to have a choice. Does that emotion matter to help me today, or does it serve that time and purpose and we are no longer, it's like a moment of detachment. And I think, there's something I share with my nephews and nieces. It's like you got to create a moment of detachment, because you got to understand that your emotions are valid, they're good to have. It's, a lot of people, you don't want to eradicate anger. We want to utilize anger and position that energy in something good, right? So how do we do that? And I think, what your book really reminded me of was this idea of, when we put it down on paper, when we get it out of our system, it's such a great way to find ourselves back into where we are today, not where we were, where we are today. And even in the future, I write a lot about the exciting things that are going to happen in the future and what I envision. However, the writing of it, the act of writing, actually brings me to the present. So what's the one lesson from protective love that you believe could help an individual reading your book today, especially around this mental wellness space that you are very much an advocate in today? And I know we kind of tapped into it, but I kind of want to go a little bit further.
Well, here's the lesson, right? I marked that lesson, and I want to just, and because you said so much in that question, I want to encourage you. I also journaled to my son from the day I knew I was expecting. So I have a different journal for him than I journal every day.
Wow.
So just so you know, that's how committed I am to it. So from the moment I knew I was expecting, and oh, by the way, I wanted a boy, I wanted a son. And it was really shallow because I wanted to just, like sports. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun, right? I really love sports. I was like, oh my God.
I love that.
It's the truth. I was like, oh, let me get, like, not to say,
There's nothing wrong with that.
not at all. But, I was like, oh my God. Like, so I had to point that out. So that is a whole nother separate journal when you were talking about how you detach. So writing to my son from the moment I knew that I was expecting him. I had the picture, everything. So that just so you'll know how committed I am. But the lesson that I think that the world could take in, and there's a lot, like there's two, like there's the miracle in every day, right? Because there is a miracle in every day. It's a gift. We don't have to see it, right? That day is a miracle. It's a new day. That's why I write in the morning glory. Oh, like I'm so grateful I saw the day. And the other lesson that is huge is that self-talk. I believe we talk to ourselves harder than the world will ever talk to ourselves. That lesson is I see it all the time. I see it in workspaces. I see it in personal spaces. I see it in disputes. I see how it limits our perspective, our ability to sit at a table with somebody that has a diverse thought than we do. It all starts with what we're saying to ourselves. And so that was probably, if I could say that out to the world, right? It would be like, hey, if you see the miracle in every day, you may change how you talk to yourself. Because that was, my mother was like, you get the worst punishment in the world. I mean, I grew up at a time you got a punishment and other things that went along with it. So you could really, there was no way that it was going to come out of your mouth what you couldn't do, right? And I also wanted to tell you how blessed you were that you got the gift from your father, because the only thing that my mother told me I wasn't going to do is sing, because all her siblings could sing, and I wanted to sing so bad, and my mother was like, that talent is not for you. Put it on the shelf and leave it there.
Right.
But everything else was open game. And I think that self-talk is like, she shared it everywhere, like any person that she met. And that's why I attach so many lessons in the book to self-talk, because we just remove ourselves before we even give ourselves a chance. And I think that in a world, even though our world is more global, we're more connected, in so many ways we're more isolated, right? Like I could play outside until it was dark. You came in at dinner time. You don't see that. You see more, okay, you're isolated. You're working on the games. And so you don't always even know, which is why I'm going to circle back with you when when your child is 10. And I'm going to see what you tell me about the messages that they get that aren't necessarily from you, because they have access to receiving messages from the world. So I think that self-talk is huge. I mean, people talk themselves into I'm never going to be I'm never going to be healed. And imagine I used to be with my mother through journeys of cancer twice, all kind of neurological issues. So we were always in spaces where people were
Doubting.
it was huge. And so I think that would be a big message to the world. And that is one of the key reasons why I get up every day in the morning and I write. Because if I do have that self-doubt in my humanity, if I am limiting myself, I get to write that out. And I could really, I could write to the point where I can have a full out argument with myself. I can use both sides of the debate. Be like,
right.
You're wrong, right? I can write it out. So I think that would be critical.
So well said. I love that. I can't agree more. I think self-doubt is one of those things that we don't necessarily need to completely eradicate, because it's going to keep showing up. And it shows up in so many different ways. It is an actor that plays every role that you can ever imagine. It's so good. It's so sneaky. And I think you're right. I think that most young people today, and really people in general, having that mindset of belief, a deep knowing, is so rooted in faith. It's so rooted in confidence. It's so rooted in what we love seeing in other people. Right. And I think that's the one thing that is really admirable, is when someone is just rooted in their belief. But that belief is always, the stronger the belief, the more contended it is with the doubt. And it's like, it doesn't go away. It comes in different formats. And I love that you went there, and I was hoping you would, because you're 100% right. Self-doubt is right up there with all the other fears that we have and, created. And whether it's our environment that creates it, whether it's our parents that create it, or whether it's our, ancestral heritage, because that's woven in there too. But it's our job. It's our duty to become a warrior, to say, okay, there's this voice here, and there's a better voice here. Which one do I listen to? Which one is really going to bring forth my dreams, my desires, my privilege, my work in the best way? And it's really the one that says, don't listen to that doubt. Just go ahead and go forward with this thing. And whether it's, religious scripture, or beautiful Buddhist scripture, or just our mothers telling us, hey, don't listen to that voice. It's as true as the existence in which we live in. So well said. I really love that about your book. The book's called Protective Love. If you're out there, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And if you don't journal, this is a great entryway to learn the processes. And I promise you, it does wonders. There is a beautiful saying in the Quran. It says, which means we taught mankind what they do not know. We taught mankind through the pen. The pen, it's the act of writing that we get to know ourselves, which I love that you mentioned that earlier. I always reflect back on that. I always try to remind myself of that. My father was the one that really taught me that. And I love that Miss Ruth May taught you so much about the impact of really believing in yourself. So if your mother was here and can see the impact of this book is having, what do you think she would say?
Oh, I know exactly what she would say. She would say what I live my life by, and it really, I read it, so I'm going to. I can't claim it as my own, so but I'm embracing it as my own, because I know that I read it, And my mother would say that she is, she's really proud, right? That when I stand before God, I am going to be able to say that I used every bit of talent that He gifted me with. That's exactly what my mother would say, because that's how she lived her life. She's like, hey, this is it. I've given you, even if I go back and I look at the conversation that she said to me on my wedding day, which was that I did put that picture in the book. It's like, I taught you everything I knew. Now the rest is up to you. So that's what she would say. And that's the way I live my life. Like when I stand before God, that's my greatest hope and dream, that I can say I used every bit of talent you gifted me with.
Beautiful. Well, my friends, I can't wrap an episode better than that. Karen, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's a privilege, it's an honor to get to know you, hang out with you, learn about Ruth. And look, if you're out there, find Protective Love. Find the book called Protective Love, a journal of 52 lessons on Amazon right now. I promise you, it's worth a read. It's worth just the act of practicing your journaling. It's done for me. I mean, it's utterly changed my life in the sense of like how to journal, why to journal. All those things are important, but the constant repetition, the consistency is the game-changing thing. And listening and reading the stories in this book are profound. I highly encourage you to go check it out. On that note, thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate y'all. Take care. Peace.
Bye-bye.